Jin Shin Jyutsu is so dear to my heart because I have had a ridiculous number of health crises over my lifetime, some of which are just childhood. You know, I had my tonsils out when I was 6, and which ironically led to thyroid cancer later when I was in my 40s. And I had half my face taken off by a dog. Like a couple of weeks after the tonsils were out. That was a pretty traumatic thing. And, you know, it turned out pretty good. I look okay, you know. But the chain reaction of things has been interesting because, like I say, back then they x-rayed tonsils and all the kids got their tonsils out. Slow growing cancer as a result. So I hit, you too? Mm-hmm. Yeah, now they know better. I hit 40 and that was my first big wake up call, and that was before Jin Shin Jyutsu. I've always been interested in healing work, but Jin Shin Jyutsu is what really spoke to me. Someone gave me a gift certificate, and if I go too fast, by the way, I get so excited about this subject that like just kind of go, what? Raise a hand, and I'll slow down. But that first session I had was just after 9/11. And I'd been doing massage with I always included energy work, but I hadn't tried Jin Shin Jyutsu yet, and I hadn't found my modality yet. It was like, really like acupuncture, but I'm a hands person, and I'd been a dancer, and so, you know, I like that physical touch connection. And I did Reiki. I even taught Reiki. I learned quantum touch. I learned polarity. I learned a number of things, but I hadn't found the one that really spoke to me, and they're all source energy. They're all wonderful in their own way. But having had thyroid cancer, that's what really set me up for wanting to learn something that had range to it. So I love it because it's so simple and accessible, and you don't have to overthink it. And yet it can help the most serious of health complications, no matter what it is, whether it's cancer, AIDS, something like that. Welcome, hi. That's okay. So I had my first session. It was just after 9/11. I was feeling kind of weirded out by people, and Claire, you're welcome to go sit over there if that's easier. And I had what I call a light switch moment. If I've chosen well, I listen to pulses, and then I decide on what sequence of handholds to use, which is called a flow. And the light switch moment is you're just like you're there, and then you're gone, but it's not sleep. It's this really deep restorative place that you go to. And I had thought coming in to see my friend Jack, who gave me my first session, that I would be too in my head because of 9/11. I was just wigged out. But I went to Claire's daughter has the most apt phrase. She calls it going to the bottom of the ocean, where you just kind of settle down there. And it's such a deep state of relaxation. I've had people where if I've chosen well, after listening to pulses and whatever the symptoms are, that kind of thing, that it can almost be comical, where I will hold, you know, a sequence can be anywhere from one hold to 20 different steps in the flow process, where I've gone to the very first step and they're gone. They've just gone. Or people who have said, I could hear myself snore and I couldn't make myself stop, right? I love it when that happens. It's just too much fun, you know? So I love it because it's so simple and accessible. In a nutshell, universal life force energy denses down to create our bodies. And we actively work, in Jin Shin we talk about 9 depths densing down into the first depth, but we actively work using 6 depths. You don't need to know all that, so don't worry about it. And we access what's called safety energy locks, which are zones. Unlike acupuncture, which are points, these are zones, which also makes it very user-friendly. So if I pass a flow on to one of my clients to do in between visits, there isn't so much worry that am I doing it right? It's so simple. It's so elegantly simple. And it makes it so that, people can use it and get a lot of benefit, like Claire. It was pivotal in between practitioner visits because it builds this consistency and this bridge between practitioner visits. And I love that it empowers people. Anything that helps them so that they feel like, okay, I'm really, really worried. I'm going to hold my thumb to help calm myself down. And I like that I could be standing here, all nervous, and I can hold my thumb, which harmonizes worry. Jin Shin Jyutsu is called a harmonizing art because it harmonizes whatever is out of balance. And it's in that harmonizing that healing can happen. And when someone comes to me with a serious condition, like Claire did with cancer, and they're going through chemo and radiation, to be able to, one, calm down all their emotions, because that's when we're going to be really healing. Anytime we're in flight or fight, excuse me, then it's like putting on the gas and the brakes at the same time. It's really harder for the body to calm down. So if I get people to the point where they have that light switch moment and they're going through a serious medical condition and they're gone, then their body is getting to what it needs to do, and that usually tells me that they really need this session a lot. It can get very complicated from the practitioner end. So it's very old, Jin Shin Jyutsu. There are ancient written records in the Imperial Palace of Japan that exists still today, and it shows that Jin Shin Jyutsu existed before the Buddha and before Moses. So this is really old, but it was an oral tradition that was handed down until about 100 years ago. And this Japanese man, Jiro Murai, who had begun looking into these things, had a very serious illness. And by doing a number of finger holds and working on his breath, and it seems to be very much a Japanese thing because in Reiki as well, the founder of that, when the Japanese, this might be an Asian thing too, culturally, I'm not sure, but when they're dying, they often like to go off to the mountains and be by themselves and do this. And so both Mikao Usui from Reiki and Jiro Murai and Jin Shin Jyutsu went off to the mountains, and within a week, he first went into a deep freeze, and then he went into a furnace, and then he knew on the 7th day that he was fine. And he dedicated the rest of his life to continuing this art of Jin Shin Jyutsu. Yes, go ahead, Patty.
Furnace and deep freeze?
Yeah, his body like fever. So, shaking and trembling. What I've heard, I have never had this verified for sure, is that he had leukemia. And he came from a family of doctors. And they didn't know what to do, and that's when he went off to the mountains. So he dedicated his life to doing this, and there's some wonderful pictures of him because this is, the early 20th century, and he's in these long classic Japanese robes. And he, in the 50s, Mary Burmeister, or Mary Eno, went back to Japan to visit her family, and it was there that she saw a demonstration that Jiro Murai was giving. He asked Mary, would you bring a gift back to America? And she's thinking, a little gift with a bow. It's like, yeah, sure, no problem, But what he meant is he wanted her to study with him and take this gift back to America. And she's really the one that began teaching it in such a way that now it's taught around the world, even though it's a mouthful to say. And a lot of the philosophy I think we can attribute to her. One of the things I love about the philosophy is that rather than buying into the name of something like cancer, AIDS, whatever, Parkinson's, they call them labels and projects. so that it removes some of that emotional attachment to my cancer, for example. You will hear people say that when I went through my cancer, or just hearing the word starts that fight or flight going again. We want to calm it all down. So, and I love this. Mary Burmeister says that when we're working on a project, projects are fun, you know. So it's just a project I'm working on. When it gets exciting, so for me, is when someone will say, you know, I've been getting these headaches, and I give them some self-care to do. Or someone says, I'm really worried about this new job. And I have a handout for you guys, so you can try some of these things at home. So the hands are very much like a template for the whole energetic system. The thumb is worry. The index finger is fear. The middle finger is anger, which seems so appropriate. The ring finger is grief or sadness. And the little finger is, in a way, the most insidious of them all. Is called pretense or trying to, which really fits with modern man. And what that is this efforting to go, 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 go. Always kind of what's next, what's next, what's next. Having a hard time being in the now. And so if we hold our little fingers, we begin to kind of climb back into our body and be present in the moment. So, but it drives a lot of other things. And then the center of the palm is helps total despondency. They also relate to all the organ flows and all the safety energy lock zones that I talked about earlier. So just going through each one of your fingers, even if you don't remember what they mean, begins to harmonize. And you can hold a safety energy lock or your fingers anywhere from 2 minutes to 20 minutes, something like that. So
which hand?
Either hand.
Okay.
You can go back and forth. You can do one hand. If you another thing I love about this is that if you part of the philosophy is getting to know yourself well enough that you know which holds to do, and learning to be more present with yourself. And but if it's the difference between coming home at the end of a hard day after a big work day, and you know, it's like you don't want to turn into another should. Like, I should do my Jin Shin. So, for example, my husband and I, we will do our self-care on the couch, watching our shows. You know, it doesn't have to get precious. And you can hold it anywhere from 2 minutes to 20 minutes or longer. And you can't overdo self-care. But it's surprisingly harmonizing. You just have to give it some time to kick in. So, any questions? Yes?
Well, you talked about things related to health issues.
Yeah.
Are these also to emotional or psychological issues too?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
In fact, I worked with a psychologist for a time who sent me a number of people with PTSD, with post-traumatic stress disorder. And sometimes the more already imbalanced someone is, the less noticeable the direct effects of Jin Shin can be in the beginning. And also people can be kind of energetically numb. But this one woman came to me who kept having panic attacks because she had this strong association with her father who had died of cancer. So when she would feel anything in her body at all, she would go into a panic. And so Jin Shin Jyutsu helps pull the trauma out of the cells. Yeah, which is very powerful. And again, it gets people out of fight or flight, so they calm down. And then they can begin to have perspective. So one of the my favorite holds is, so here we have worry, fear. This is anger, but also extreme emotions. So I could give her the hold of holding the thumb, index finger, and the middle finger all together to help her with her panic. Another terrific one is called the big hug, which is like this, which makes me think of Saturday Night Live and that. But in the armpits is the director, the safety energy lock there, and on the chest is called the 13s. There's, you know, like I mentioned, there's 26 safety energy locks on each side of the body, and this is the creator, and it's very powerful. But this hold together is complete harmony. And so that can help someone who's a bit in a panic attack. In fact, when I teach my self-help classes, I'll usually start people with the big hug because it helps unify the group and gets everyone on the same page. Yes?
I just have a question. Can you give us an explanation of what a safety energy lock is?
They're zones of, they're kind of like portals, or in a way they're like chakras. Just like acupuncture points are like tiny chakras, energy centers that, and they call them safety energy locks because when it shuts down, that's when we get a symptom, like a headache or a stomach ache or cancer or any of those kind of things. Usually when we have a big project like cancer or AIDS, whatever, it's been accumulating for a number of years. So this is an access point for like a little energy center, and they interrelate to each other within the depths, and they communicate to each other. So
What does the lock part mean? Are you unlocking it? Or?
yeah, so we're unlocking it. So it's a friendly warning to say you're out of harmony. Something is out of balance here. So if you're getting chronic headaches, sleeplessness, kidney stones, whatever, then it's time to start paying attention to yourself. But there are things you can do for yourself, which is great. And I love that people are not absolutely dependent on me, that they can do things for themselves. Because, you know, for one thing, especially someone going through a health crisis, it can get, you know, very expensive to go to an alternative practitioner. And I think together with Western medicine, which I've had a lot of experience with, it can work beautifully, absolutely beautifully. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
When you started, you said I've had a lot of health issues
Yeah.
in the past. How does that relate to
So
cancer?
it was after I had thyroid cancer, and I was terrified out of my mind, and I did the energy work systems that I knew of at the time, and but it required me going to somewhere else. And so there are the big projects like cancer, and it was with my first of my 3 hip replacements. I know, I had a car accident when I was 19 and fell on one hip, and I didn't know to go get it looked at. I thought I'm bruised, of course I'm sore. I danced on it, I jogged on it, you know, it was the 80s, and the other hip was compensating the whole time. So I had the first hip done, didn't know Jin Shin. Second hip, I was just starting to learn a little bit about Jin Shin, and then the last hip was recalled, which was like, are you kidding me? Are you serious?
Recall.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, exactly, like a Toyota. So, but by that time, that one was the easiest hip replacement because I did self-care before the surgery. It can really reduce healing time dramatically, helps vitality dramatically, helps remove the medications and chemicals out of your system dramatically. And then there's the spectacular, which was my stroke. Picture this, I am sitting down I typically, most of the time, do one-on-one, face-to-face coaching sessions. And this was not a Jin Shin session, but, and I started to get this massive headache. And she had just been telling me, this is kind of hilarious to me now, she's just been telling me about a kind of chronic headache that she got that had been diagnosed with a term I hadn't heard before. And at that moment was when my headache came on. Well, the longer I've done Jin Shin Jyutsu, and especially when I began learning life coaching, my ability to be more empathic and to feel into other bodies has gotten stronger. So my immediate hit was, wow, I'm really getting empathic here. This is kind of cool, right? But then it got worse and worse, and I collapsed on the floor. Thank God I wasn't alone, because it came on so suddenly and so quick. She was able to go out and get my husband, who then took me to the hospital. They tell my husband this is PTSD for him. It was as bad and horrendous a situation as you can imagine. He was told that I would die that night, and that I had cancer throughout my entire body, and did he want to do not resuscitate?
Oh my God.
Because even if she did live, she would be a vegetable or have so many physical impairments that she would be bedridden for the rest of her life.
Shouldn't do that.
What hospital was it?
It was at St. Francis, which was very, very close.
So you had
To
a
me.
stroke, and somehow when they were looking for the stroke, they found cancer throughout your body.
Yeah, because they needed to find where the brain bleed was. So my neurologist explained it. I mean, I understand why they said this to my husband, which sounds cruel, but it really wasn't. Because quality of life is, not everyone wants to be bedridden for life or a vegetable if the body can't take care of itself. And I wouldn't have. I wouldn't want to be a vegetable. And so my neurologist explained in the post-op visit that all the signs were not just bad, they were horrendous. So I was going into seizures, which shows that there's bad things going on. When they looked at the brain bleed scans of my brain, it was everywhere in my brain, the blood. And open blood in the brain is considered completely toxic. And I was demonstrating something called the death posture, which you start clenching your hands and the neck goes back like this. And so, it looked really, really bad. And so the next morning, they took me off sedation because keeping me still was important. And my blood pressure had gone really, really high. So they took me off life support, and up until that point, I don't have any memory of this, and it's just as well. Who needs the trauma? But I was still intubated, and I look at my husband, and I'm pointing to it like, what the hell? What's going on? And what I remember is everything looked like a massive gray fog, and I'm looking through like a tube at his face, and that's all I can see is his face. And he's saying, "Do you know who I am?" And apparently I gave him, because I couldn't speak, a withering look like, seriously? Yeah, I know who you are. So then the doctors, fast forward, they don't have a stroke brain trauma unit at St. Francis. They took me to their affiliate hospital, and even just driving me the 45 minutes away in the ambulance, they put me back under sedation. And even a bump in the road might have made a gigantic difference. And it is my heartfelt belief that it was all the years of giving Jin Shin Jyutsu to other people, because when you give a treatment, you get a treatment, and doing self-care that saved my life. I mean, I truly believe that. It's like somehow my body figured out how to do it. And so then I had 2 operations. I still have a little dent in my head from the drain to take off the excess blood. And he showed me the scans. I mean, when he showed me the brain bleed of the scans of my brain, he said, I couldn't figure out why this doctor was taking so long to explain everything, because most of the time they're like, chop, chop, let's go. He said, we call this configuration the Star of Death because it's that bad. I mean, I'm laughing now because clearly I'm fine. I have all my I have all my marbles. I haven't noticed any deficits. And here's the weird thing. My memory seems to be a little bit better. I know, right? And while I was in the hospital, I think, Claire, you were the one that actually tipped Jack and Wade off. The guys I do trades with for Jin Shin Jyutsu, they rushed to the ICU and did treatments on me. My family was blown away watching them give me, I have no memory of it, giving me treatments, because I was hooked up to all these machines and they could see my blood pressure go down as they worked on me. And as they would experiment with a hold, with, generally speaking, the hands are used as jumper cables to connect the circuits. And that's why doing your own self-care can make a difference. But they noticed that if they added more pressure or less pressure, it would affect my blood pressure. It so inspired my sister-in-law. She ended up looking for help out in her neck of the wood, out in Huntley, because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. So,
What about the cancer?
so the cancer, I have, that was another interesting story. So the cancer was, as soon as they told me this, I thought, oh, I know that's not it. I have a tendency towards lipomas, which are harmless fatty cysts. They run in my family. My mother has them. My sister had them. I've had them removed because they're a little bit unsightly. My son had them. So when they said it's throughout my whole body, they needed to find out where the aneurysm was coming from. So they did a full body scan while I was in the ER. So, but they were very worried and concerned about a tumor that was large. It was softball size in my left adrenal gland. And after the stroke, I began to get used to the notion that I was a miracle. And the neurologist said, yes, you are a miracle. It's not just us imagining it. You are a miracle. But then, round 2 started with this whole cancer treatment. And one of the gifts of fear is actually intuition. And when, to backtrack just a little bit, a couple years before, because of these lipomas and things, after the thyroid cancer, my oncologist that I would see every year would keep track of also a breast lump I had in my right breast. And the technician a couple years ago said, I just don't like what I'm seeing. Went to my oncologist, he said, I think you're fine. But let's be 100% sure. So I went for a breast MRI, which will catch anything. It catches everything. And I could feel that familiar fear begin to rise up, that mortality fear. Anyone who's been diagnosed with something once knows we're mortal, right? I'm holding my index finger for fear. But I also told myself, okay, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel scared out of my mind, because how am I going to heal if I'm in fear? Not to mention, whatever time I've got, I want to make the best of it. Whether I get hit by a truck tomorrow or whether it's from breast cancer, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So I went into meditation and I asked my knowing, okay, do I have cancer in my breast? And the answer was no, you're fine. And that was true. When I went inside and asked the same question about this softball size growth on my adrenal gland, the answer was, yeah, you do, but you're still going to be fine. So, I know, right?
And is that so?
And it was so, yeah. So I'd kind of gotten used to the neurologists and even my general practitioner. They'd walk into the ICU and they'd stare at me and to see if any deficits were going to show up, or whether I would stumble over my words or things like that. And there's no question I felt very kind of far away and tired from the experience, because I was so unusual. In fact, one of the ER doctors was so blown away that I was alive, he made the special trip down to Presence Resurrection, which is 45 minutes away, just to follow up on me, just to see what happened to me. He had to know the end of the story, and I was fine. But then, because it was attached to my adrenal gland, I went to an endocrinologist, and I found someone who, they did finally narrow it down. They sent results to the Mayo Clinic because they couldn't figure it out for a little while. I'm one of 5% of people that has this, it's genetically a genetically oriented type of cancer, which the good news was is I didn't need chemo or radiation. It was like, yeah, that was great. Even though I know Jin Shin Jyutsu can make a gigantic difference in the quality of life, even if you have chemo and radiation. But still, it's interesting when you get quiet enough to ask that body part, what's going on, what you might get. But so when we're in the womb, this type of cancer is where our endocrine system is being created. And once the endocrine system is created, then it shuts down. And a few people, 5%, like me, it turns back on. They don't know what turns it on, and they don't know what turns it off. But what was interesting, and I was so guided to my oncologist, I love this man, totally gave big kudos to his team, totally got the emotional component of it, and was really well respected in his field. And on the surgery date, he said, this is a celebration day because you're going to get rid of what you don't need. And it's like, I love that, this positive thing. And I went through the surgery, and that was September. So I had the stroke in May, and then they finally got to figuring out what this was to take action in September. And he gave me a special presentation to his colleagues on my case because it was so unusual for the cancer. But of course, I'm doing Jin Shin in the hospital. Jack and Wade, my friends, are coming to give me treatments in the hospital, and when I got home. And so, this is one of the reasons I love Jin Shin Jyutsu. So, yes.
How much does your intention have to do with?
I think it's part of it, absolutely. Which for me, which is the natural extension of my life coaching. I really want to help people because I've been there. I know facing big surgeries is terrifying. Mostly the first time, and then you kind of get to know. And if you do things like meditation, then that is huge. Yeah. Any other questions for the moment?
I just have that one question about the densities.
Oh, yeah.
Is the goal to be a lighter density on Earth?
No. Think of it more as frequencies. And we need all of these depths that we have operating in our body to be in harmony and in balance with each other. So in a nutshell, the energy comes up the back and down the front, splits off into two, onto each side of the body. Then there is a mediator that coordinates between the two sides, so keeps things in balance that way. There's all the organ flows, and so we need them all. The first depth, for example, is our container. It's our skin. It's stomach and spleen are the organs. It helps us with our boundaries, and because it's considered a harmonizing art, what that can mean is the boundaries are, if they're too rigid or they're too porous, it helps find that middle place, right? So Jin Shin Jyutsu does not see the body, mind, and spirit as separate, but they're all interrelated and important. And emotions that are stuck, like fight or flight, for example, is a good example of stuck emotions, is a great one that we want to harmonize because we want our body to not have the gas and the brakes on at the same time. Another PTSD person, actually, she had a really, and we know now that PTSD can be more than not just going to war or that kind of thing. It can be any number of things. This woman had a bad breakup and she could not stop crying. I mean, could not stop crying. So I did a flow which is connected to the second depth, which is grief and sadness, to help harmonize that in her body, and she stopped crying, And I saw her for a while, and it got to be less and less and less. And then she was working with her psychologist as well. That was before I got into my own coaching thing. So it's huge. If cancer's going to come up, it's often connected to the second depth. It has the majority of the safety energy locks in it. The third depth has to do with blood essence, liver, gallbladder, things like that. The flow of blood through the body. Fourth depth is kidney, bladder, water balance. And it's interesting because in the fourth depth there's only one safety energy lock, which is at the back, at the base of your ribs. It's connected with fear, deep fear especially. And there's often these poetic meanings associated with this, and the juxtaposition of the meanings to me is kind of hilarious because in its safety energy lock 23, it's controller of my destiny and the janitor. because it does such a great job of cleaning.